Marinero, the Sick podcast, coming off the Montreal Canadiens 3-2 win in overtime versus the Winnipeg Jets to complete the unexpected 4-game sweep. Joining me from Global TV Montreal, Brian Wild. How you doing, bud?
I'm having an excellent day, basking in the glory of still working.
Yeah, you know what? It's a good thing, Brian. It really is. If I would have told you before the Canadiens and the Jets that the Canadiens were going to sweep Winnipeg after coming off a Game 7 win versus Toronto on Monday, playing in Winnipeg, their first game on Wednesday, knowing that there was going to be a back-to-back on Sunday, Monday, playing Game 2 on Friday, so the Monday would be the third game in 4 nights, you would have said what exactly?
Oh, I'm going to surprise you here. I actually thought the Canadiens were going to do very well in this series because I really felt that the Maple Leafs were a much better team than the Jets. And if they were able to turn that series around against the Maple Leafs, I really thought success against the Jets was possible. And you mentioned Game 1. I even thought that could be a good night because it's rest versus rust, and rust is hard. Rust is hard. I think rust is harder than rest unless you were doing the Canadian schedule of 4 and 6 and 5 and 8.
It's the Sick Podcast. I'm Marinero. He's Brian Wild, and the show is brought to you by Essentia, the world's only natural memory foam mattress. Go to myessentia.com/sickpod and see why Essentia is the mattress of choice for many athletes, including over 25% of professional hockey players. Use code SICKPOD for a free pillow with your purchase. Essentia, beyond organic sleep. Speaking of sleep, Brian, in Game 1, and I want to backtrack, Mark Scheifele put Jake Evans to sleep when he hit him when he came up, and it's a deliberate headshot, and he knocked him out. Listen, I thought the Canadiens had a very good chance against Winnipeg, but I don't know about you, but when Scheifele was suspended by Department of Player Safety for 4 games, I said to myself, he's too big a player and too important a piece for Winnipeg. He won't play the Canadiens again. I thought that was a huge turning point in the series, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the biggest turning point in the entire series. They had already lost Danault, and Pierre-Luc Dubois was playing terribly up the middle. They needed Scheifele. He quarterbacks the power play. I mean, it was a gigantic loss, and by his own volition. I mean, just stupidity. He was very aggressive the entire night, and he had a mental mindset that just wasn't right, and it overboiled in the last seconds. And he cost the team, maybe not the entire series, but he sure cost them a lot of respect in the series because they lost respect with the hit, and then they lost respect by going down so easily in 4 straight games. And it got worse. I mean, by the end of that series, what were the shots on goal? 38-11 at one point? So without Scheifele, they were not the same team. But it wasn't just Scheifele, you know. They lost Danault too. That was big. I mean,
yeah,
it just didn't go their way. It didn't go their way.
You brought up Pierre-Luc Dubois, and I know that John Tortorella was on his case earlier in the season before he got traded away. A year ago, he had such a huge game in the playoffs. You could tell that this guy was really coming on as a hockey player.
Yeah.
What in the world happened to him? He looked like a liability on the ice for Winnipeg. Looked terrible.
I have no idea, man. I have no idea. I mean, hockey can surprise you. I mean, look at Kotkaniemi. Everybody was like, trade Kotkaniemi and throw in Caulfield in a first and get Dubois. I mean, people were going crazy to try to get Dubois. And now look back at that. You have him doing absolutely nothing the whole series. I don't know exactly the total, but I think he hasn't scored in like 22 games, 23 games. It's a huge number, not even 1 goal. And he was completely ineffective and looked disinterested. And then you put that against Kotkaniemi, and you got the same kind of weird vibe that you don't know why things changed so much. You have him struggling so badly. Anybody would have taken Kotkaniemi for Dubois straight up. And then now one turns in a great playoff so far, 20 years of age still. And the other one looks like something's wrong and nobody knows what it is. Because John Tortorella, what was angering him so much over the years, you kind of saw why a bit, right?
They say that the best trades sometimes are the ones that you don't make, right? And you just talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois. As you know, there were a lot of people in this city that were putting a significant amount of pressure on Marc Bergevin to pull the trigger and make a deal for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And you talked about Kotkaniemi, and some were saying Kotkaniemi and this guy, Kotkaniemi and that guy. Others even said Suzuki straight up. Others said Suzuki with someone else, whatever. But people were willing to give up on Kotkaniemi and or Suzuki without a problem for Pierre-Luc Dubois. Marc Bergevin makes that trade. The Canadiens are not going to the semis.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? I mean, the thing about it is we can't really even know exactly what Marc Bergevin, how interested he was. It's more interesting that what it took was a Laine. And when I assessed the trade after, my first thought was that I tweeted is the Canadiens don't have a Laine. If it took a Laine, then the Canadiens were never in the mix for that trade.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a Laine. So I don't know what Bergevin could have possibly thrown out there that would have made Columbus get interested. And that's how it went. They were
Brian, he may have been able to acquire Dubois for less than a Laine, knowing that Laine was making $6.75 million on the final year of his contract, was going to be a free agent, and was looking for his next deal to be $8 million.
That's fair.
So you're right. They didn't have a 40-goal scorer in a Laine, but they probably could have got him without giving up a Laine. But once again, we know that Marc Bergevin likes Dubois. He really wanted him. When he traded PK Subban, he was trying to make a deal with the Edmonton Oilers and get the 4th pick in the draft, convinced that the 4th pick was going to be Dubois. He was going to be available. But, of course, that didn't materialize.
All right, let me turn the tables on you then, okay?
Yeah.
I'm asking you a question. What deal does he want to make for Dubois now? Is he still that hungry? Has he watched this series and he's still that interested? Or did he see something that he went, oh my God, thank goodness.
If it would have taken either a Suzuki or a Kotkaniemi before, and he said no, and it would still take a Suzuki or a Kotkaniemi or even a Caulfield for that matter, he'll still say no.
Absolutely. So what would he say yes to now? Dubois 4? I mean, if he's still hungry, because you're right. You're totally right. They were hungry for him. And if there wasn't the big surprise in the 3 pick, they would have made that deal. You're absolutely right.
So let me just, I'll answer your question because I don't like leaving questions unanswered, right?
I know you don't. That's why you're
It's probably not a popular thing that I'm going to say, but I knowing you'll understand it. I cannot say Thomas Tatar's UFA at the end of the year. You and I both know that he's gone and he'll walk for nothing. Okay.
No, and he's worth nothing as a UFA.
I'm not going to say Phil Danault because Pierre-Luc, whether Danault stays or he goes and he's making a good case to stay.
Can't sell it.
You can't sell it.
You can't sell it.
If I'm going to answer the question, I'll say Brendan Gallagher and a prospect, not Caulfield, Kotkaniemi, or Suzuki, if you still consider them prospects.
Yeah, but he's too young. He's too young. You got to go in the same age group. You got to pick someone in the same age group. You know that. So Dubois 23, right?
Yeah.
All right. So who's in that mix? See, I don't see a trade. I don't see a trade. For a
23-year-old, no, I don't see one either. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. All right.
Maybe if they're in a big rebuild.
Yeah.
Maybe, well, obviously, they got to improve their D. We saw it. They got to improve their D.
Yeah.
Right? Winnipeg? I mean, we all saw it. It was terrible.
Big time. Big time.
So, you know who's got a lot of D prospects, right?
The Canadiens.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know one guy I'm a little nervous about, right? Because he might not come. He's too close after his next year to just saying, you know what? I'll go back in the draft. Or I'm going to go free. Yeah. Jordan Harris is looking like he might go free. So
Jordan Harris,
it's a little nerve-wracking. So if you get a bad vibe from him, you gotta deal him before he declares.
All right, before we get to Jordan Harris
into Adam Fox
and a possible deal there, let's talk about what happened in the series. It's the Sick Podcast and a shout-out to excellent photo centrally located close to downtown shopping and universities. Ships to all of Canada professional staff at the store and online to help you choose the gear you really need. Excellentphoto.ca. All right. We talked about Phillip Danault. I am so proud of this player. His play was up and down during the season. I thought he had a terrible first 2 months to his season. The final month of the regular season, I thought he played well. The way he's played in the playoffs and the pride that he takes in doing what he does, I'm not going to tell you he's Guy Carbonneau because Guy Carbonneau had a Hall of Fame career, but I'll tell you that his play reminds me of the job that Carbonneau did, especially when they last won the Cup in '93.
You know what I like in the last playoff 2 rounds that tells us so much about what the Canadiens line is all about. And the last time I was on your podcast, we talked a lot, in fact, about Tatar and would you sign him? Danault, would you sign him? And we were not certain at the time when we were talking about it, who was the driver of that line.
Yeah.
We know that now.
It's
Tatar
Danault, and it's not even close.
Exactly. We know the driver now, and we didn't know it. But now you put in Tatar, and that was the weakest of the choices so far. You put in Evans, and he was better. You put in Lehkonen, he was better. So no, whoever it is, Tatar, Lehkonen, Evans, it's still shutting down Matthews.
Yeah.
So and who's the driver?
It's definitely Danault and Brian. So many great
and Gallagher
stories.
Too. And Gallagher too was there. So we can't exclude Gallagher, but the center is a driver of a line. People know this. This is not rocket science. And he's the guy driving the shutdown.
Yeah.
And Tatar has, I would say, unless there's something really drastic happening, is, played his way right out of an offer.
Yeah.
And Danault has played his way back into a nice offer. Now, I think you broke the whole $5 million was overblown story, and it was more an opening salvo than a walk away from the table.
That was actually, if I can, that was actually Normal Flynn that brought it up.
Good. All right.
So
that's important because people all think, Tony, that it was a walk away at 5. It wasn't. It was an opening offer at 5, and it stopped after that. And that's significantly different. So I see him coming back for 4 something in a very tight cap world.
Well, you know what? At 4 something, I mean, you bring back Philip Danault any day of the week and twice on Sundays. I think it's safe to say. It's unbelievable when you think about it, right? That several months ago, when was it? Probably about 3 months ago, when Stefan Waite was relieved of his duties, that Marc Bergevin had to go in front of the media in a Zoom call and answer questions about Carey Price. And I was one of those guys who asked those questions saying, can you begin to explain to me a guy who has this much talent, this much ability, how he has one great year, one bad year, one great year, one bad year, how does this happen? And now we're seeing Price play like this, and I almost feel like we all got played during the season, but I don't know what happened, but clearly, and one of the things I think happened is the defense is just much more built for the playoffs than they are for the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. Blake Wheeler, again, I'll quote him. He said it last night. He says, that's a heavy defense. And they did not enjoy it, playing that heavy defense. Everybody getting whacked into a wall all the time, game in and game out. And that's what they mean by it. The 2 and the through, right? And that Marc Bergevin is famous. And the 2 was the first 4 games against Toronto, and the through was the next 3. Where the same guys were like, oh, my God, every time I go get the puck, I get hammered by these big bodies. And it wears you down after a while. And that's what happened. So look, you saw the tide turn.
All the Canadiens fans want the Canadiens to win the Cup, and we don't know if they will or if they won't. At this point, I think we could say anything's possible, right? The way they played great. I will say this. Out of all the teams that are still playing, they have the best goalie and the best top 4D.
Well, I like Colorado's top 4D a lot. I mean, that's pretty spectacular, that top 4D. I
like Tampa too, but you can make a case for Tampa with Vasilevskiy.
You could make a case.
McDonough and Sergachev, but
You know what? I'm going to argue instead that the composition is different. I mean, you look at Colorado, and I think that's the best top 4D. But you look at the composition. That's some big PMD there. That's all puck movers, right? McCarr, puck mover. Go ahead. You got your finger up.
No, I just want to tell you, I agree with you. Yeah. But I think Colorado, out of all the teams that are left, have the best top 4D for the regular season.
Yeah.
And I think the Canadiens, out of all the teams left, have the best top 4D for the playoffs.
Well, you know what? If they play each other, it's going to be interesting to watch that because I've been a proponent of puck movers like for ages. I think they're absolutely vital to success. And I think even having Gustafsson in the lineup has been important as a puck mover. He's been a quarterback on the power play. He's been pretty much error-free. And I think you have to have that component in your game. But you're absolutely right. When you look at their top four, they're all PMD. When you look at the Canadiens, they're all through the playoffs, stay-at-home guys, except for Petrie is somewhat a PMD. So, yeah, it's going to be fun if those two teams. And add this, Nathan McKinnon actually said he doesn't like playing Phil Danault. Says, I don't know why, but I can't play that guy very well. And that's going to be fun, too. And I think the goalie, Grubauer, is the least tested. So if you're going to break down a goalie, sometimes that happens in the third round. Remember Nashville's long run, and then Pecorino just lost it. Yeah. It was a 9.62 that turned into an 8.50 in the last series. Yeah. So, and Carey can go. He's been there before. High-pressure games, more pressure, he gets better. He had a nice rest before the playoffs started. So those are some of the ways that I think it could be very interesting. And actually in ways – I don't want to say favors the Canadiens, but they're closer than people are giving them credit for.
It's the Sick Podcast. Go to sportbuffshop.com for all of your officially licensed sports apparel and more. Use code SICK15 for 15% off on all their items. All right, so the Montreal Canadiens played their fourth and final game versus Winnipeg on Monday night. Should Colorado and Vegas go to Game 7, that game will take place on Saturday, which means the Canadiens and the winner of that series could start as early as Monday. The Canadiens would start on the road. But should it be Monday, Brian, that is 1 week between games. We know that when Carey Price rests up, he comes back even stronger. You talked about rust versus rest before, and it hurt Winnipeg, and Montreal didn't have a problem with it. But I bet you, Brian, that if you poll anybody in hockey, from players to coaches to GMs, they'll take the rest every time.
The deeper you go. The deeper you go, the more it turns into rest. The only time it may bother you and be a non-factor or even detrimental is early, between 1 and 2. Between 2 and 3, it's all about rest. And between 3 and 4, it's really about rest. If you're the team that has 7 days before the Stanley Cup final and the other team just played the night before and they've already gone through about 21 of these games, 19 games, fighting that hard for every inch in this violent, difficult, physical style of hockey that's played in the playoffs, I'll take the rest now. I'll take the rest, especially how much the top 4 D are used. All of them, Sherratt, Weber, 25 minutes. That's big. Yeah. Those are big minutes.
Which Canadiens player in round 2 impressed you the most, not named Carey Price?
Probably Nick Suzuki. I mean, he's turning into a 1C right in front of our eyes. He's 21 years of age, and he's becoming a first-line center. He's got a 200-foot game right now. He's got great line mates that he has great communication with and chemistry. He finished the season, even though the team was really struggling, as a point-per-game guy. And he's right up there in the playoffs, and he's not a defensive liability. I mean, you and I talked back in the day when I was still at CTV, and one of the things we were always talking about was win the middle, win the game. And we were always talking about how many decades was it going to be before the Canadiens were ever going to be set up at center. And I see it now. I see Suzuki's your 1 point per game. Caulfield's his companion, great chemistry. They're 21 and 20. And the second line is Kotkaniemi, who we see a profile change.
Yeah, of course.
The 6 skills have not really shone yet and come through that one can ever guess that he's higher than a 60-point guy. But if he's physical, if he's riding players off, if he's got a 200-foot game, if he gets in front of the net and plays dirty, I mean, he's suddenly turned into a physical centerman, a la Bobby Smith, instead of anybody with, sharp stick skills, which I think he can still develop. But even if Tony Suzuki's an 82-point guy and Kotkaniemi is a 60-point guy, you're set for the next decade.
Yeah. So look, it's hard to disagree with you when everyone's playing so well, though. There's so many guys.
Who's your guy?
Out, right? So I love Suzuki for sure. I love Danault. I love Sherratt, but I think I'm going to go with Shea Weber. I just thought Weber was
that's good.
An incredible force. I mean, listen, everyone knows that he's lost a step. Everyone knows that there's a little bit less mustard coming off of his shot, but his ability to take players out of the play, clear the front of the net, play mistake-free hockey, pile up the minutes, not show his fatigue, have some extended shifts, be a force on the penalty kill. And Weber has something right now, and this is very important, that Zdeno Chara had in the 2011 playoffs, and it's called intimidation. I find he's intimidating. Guys are thinking twice before going down his wing. He gives you that cross check. He gives you that late hit behind the play. And I think he's got some players on the opposition a little bit nervous. So I'm going to go with Weber. I think Suzuki's a fantastic choice. I think there's 4 or 5 other guys that we could name that would be a fantastic choice as well.
And I'm just going to add very quickly on your Weber thought. There wasn't enough heed paid to the schedule that the Canadiens had to play. There simply was not. Every time you mentioned it, somebody would come back with you with an excuse, or everybody goes through that. Everybody didn't go through that. Only Vancouver and Montreal went through that. Yeah. And in the other division, it's Boston, New Jersey, and Buffalo. There were 5 teams that went through that. 10-day breaks, 2-week breaks. Everyone else did not go through that. So it was all BS when people said that. No one else was doing 4 and 6 and 5 and 8. And that is what hurt Shea Weber a lot. And Eric Staal was minus, 12 in 20 games?
Yeah.
And now give a guy some rest, and now they get more rest?
Brian, it's funny you're talking about the schedule, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes I think what we think when a season starts or before a season starts, we can't lose sight of that, and we should go back to it. I'm going to give you an example. Before the season started, I looked at the Canadiens and I said, hold on a second. A year ago, they beat Pittsburgh in the play-in. They lost in Game 6 to Philadelphia. They've added Tyler Toffoli, Josh Anderson, Joel Edmondson, Corey Perry, Jake Allen, Alexander Romanov, up until that point. By the end of the year, they also added Eric Staal and Cole Caulfield. And so I said, this team, if they almost got it done versus Philadelphia a year ago, should be able to go very far. I actually thought they were a great value at 22-1, and I put money on them to win the cup before the season started. Then the way the season finishes, and they had to scratch and claw their way into the playoffs, at one point I was thinking, what's going on? This looks like a dysfunctional group, and I should have paid more attention to the schedule and said to myself, come playoff time, they're going to be fine because they're the team that I thought they were before the season started. Instead, a lot of us were worried they were the team that didn't look very good down the stretch.
Yeah, and quickly to add, I mean, I felt like I knew what they had 3 minutes into the game. Last dozen of the season, I would look at the first 3 minutes and I go, oh man, they got no legs tonight. 5-1 loss. Here we go. And I was right every time. They look like they have some legs. It's going to be competitive. Caulfield wins in overtime. You could just see how many nights they had absolutely no energy. And then you look and you go, okay, they played Monday, they played Tuesday, they played Thursday, and it's Friday.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, gee, I wonder why they have no energy.
So in ending in 10 seconds, I think you answered that question before. Who presents a better matchup for the Canadiens, Colorado or Vegas?
Well, you know what? You made me think Colorado, because I'm really going to be interested in the contrast of defensive styles and the contrast of an inexperienced, relatively goalie against Carey Price, who's rested. I think those contrasts could be really fun. And then add McKinnon not liking Danault. I think I like that.
I hope you're going to join me on the Sick Podcast during the Montreal Canadiens, hopefully versus Colorado Avalanche semifinals. Talk to you later, Brian. Thank you.
Cheers, bud. He's
Brian Wild from CTV Montreal. And now it's time for you to make some money. Money, 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 money. Money, 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 money.
It's time for Sick Picks. Brought to you by MyBookie.
Place your bets on MyBookie. Go to mybookie.ag/the Sick Podcast and use code SickPicks for a 50% deposit bonus. Bet, win, get paid. He is at Run My Bets. He's my buddy Cash. And the last time I spoke to him, he said, you want to make big bucks? You bet the under on James Harden, 27.5 points. He left 30 seconds into the game with an injury. He made you some money. Cash, make me some more.
What's happening, guys? Coming off a huge night last night, guys. Montreal to win the series 4-0. We took them, guys. This Winnipeg team was deflated. NHL has been red hot. We had the Islanders last night as well. Massive underdog cash. I'm looking at an NBA play for you guys. It's going to be game 2, Phoenix Suns, Denver Nuggets. I'm looking at Nikola Jokic player prop, guys. Over 29.5 points. He did less than 30 points only one time this playoff so far. It was 21 points against Portland. They lost that game. What did he do the next game? Came out and brought out 38 points, guys. This is probably the MVP of the playoffs so far to me. Maybe Kevin Durant is. I like my money over 29.5. I'm going to drop another little promo for you guys. For game 2, the Suns are laying 6 points. Shoot me a message on Instagram at Run My Bets. Anybody who does, I'm going to give you my pick for that game. I have a huge pick. Again, the line, Suns are laying 6 points. I'm all over this game, guys. I'm dropping a lot of cash on it. Shoot me a message. I'm going to give you the winner of that game. Also, make sure you book Nikola Jokic over 29.5 points. The next time I'm on here, I'm going to be bragging about it, guys, because it's going to cash.
You can follow us on YouTube and all podcast platforms, The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. That's my buddy Cash. And once again, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Until we talk to you again next time, it's The Sick Podcast.